Okay, so in this lesson here, what we're going to be looking at is going to be the edge loop, extrude, and bevel tools. So there's plenty of tools you can use in Maya to get more complicated shapes out of these primitive shapes, but we're just going to try and stick to those ones. We might look at the smooth tool towards the end here with this one, but let's just first look at the edge loop tool and talk about how that works. So if I'm looking here from this view, another view I wanted to look at here is in here in shading. I can change this to X-ray, and that allows me to see what's underneath that model there, so it can be quite useful there. So as we can see, this blade here sort of comes in. So if I go back to vertex mode and I left click and hold to select all these, I can now sort of shrink those in to get it closer to that shape. But the problem is we don't have that many vertices around here to be able to redefine this shape. So what the edge loop tool does, if we go here to insert edge loop, is it allows us to create a line of vertices and edges that go around the shape that allow us to then define or put more definitions into this shape. So I'll show you what that looks like in 3D so you can appreciate everything that's there. You can see this red line that's across here. If I left click and hold on an edge, so I can't just click here in the face, I've got to actually select an edge, it'll create this sort of ghost, and if I hold it there, I can left click and drag it down the sort of mesh itself. But what it does is give me a preview of what that's going to look like there, and that's really useful for me to line that up there. But once that's there, I now have more options for being able to reshape this size here. So I can bring this up here, for example, and scale it out there. And so I'm getting more definition into this blade. I can then click here because that'll always have the last tool that I used, which is this insert edge loop. And I can go down here and select another one here because I can see that's where it bends in. Sometimes it'll stay highlighted, other times it won't. If you do want to highlight it again, just click on here and then click on it once, hold down shift and double click. And this is another advantage of using edge loop. What that does is it selects all the faces, all the edges, vertices or faces in a ring. And because this is all using the edge loop tool and all forms a perfect ring, we can do that. The other way I can do it is I can go to vertex mode and then just box select them like that. So I'm just going to scale that one in there, so I've got that sort of going out and then bowing back in sort of look. And then just these bottom ones down here, I'm just going to stretch out there, and I might even put in another edge loop here and then scale it in. And as we can see now, from this very simple cylinder, we've now got a nice blade sort of shape to this sword. So we're going to do the same one here on this one as well. And we're going to use edge loop just on here. Because I want to make this symmetrical though, I'm actually going to switch on symmetry here and go Object X. And what this does is it means that hopefully whatever I do to one side, I think that's only Blender that has those ones, so we'll just have to eyeball this one. In fact, no we won't. I'm going to cut this down the middle and then we'll just create symmetry for it later. So I'm now just going to create some more loops here to give me more vertices to work with. I don't want to go too crazy with how many edge loops I create. That's always a temptation to just have a million different vertices and zoom in and like want to get it exactly on. I'd recommend against this. You always want to just get the basic sort of shapes and then go back later and refine it. So that there sort of gives us a shape. I want to make sure it's symmetrical on both sides though. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to delete those faces there, grab this one here and go edit, duplicate, or as it says here, Control D. And then here on the scale X, if I put in here minus, that will flip it around. So we've got this perfectly symmetrical sort of second shape there. Okay, cool. And then just here with this one, I don't think I'm going to actually bother with edge loops. I'm just going to grab these bottom vertices here and shrink it down because that is all that's really required there. I might just put in one edge loop. And you'll notice I'm only scaling it out with the X one there. It's because I don't want it to actually come up. I want to sort of keep it flat. If I use that center one, it would rise it up there and everything, and that's not really what we want. Okay, so the last one that we're going to look at here, just before we end up this video, is just going to be smoothing this one out. So I'm just going to hit a mesh and go smooth. And this creates a shape that's very like a sphere, but unlike a sphere, it actually gives us a few less options to work with, which makes it a little bit easier to actually model with. So for example, I can select these here, scale it out there, and then bring these down. If I was working with a sphere, this would be an absolute nightmare to work with. Now we could, in theory, bring this down and everything like that. I might leave that for when we start looking a little bit closer at this one, because I think that's gonna cause us a few issues later. But yeah, that's ideally, I guess, kind of what we end up with. And so that's how you get a more closer sort of definition there. The last tool I said we'd look at is the bevel tool. So see how these hard edges are here and everything, and we don't really want that? Well, what we want to do is we want to be able to select an edge and then bevel it. And what that does is it just sort of slides it off a little bit there and just smooths it off. And you can change the number of segments you have in there, or the amount that it bevels. And you don't have to just select one. You can actually select as many of these edges as you want. And so I'm just going to actually do that now by holding down Shift and selecting all these edges, and then Edit Mesh, Bevel. And that's just going to bevel off those edges there just nicely. And then rather than doing the other side, I'm just going to Control D, go minus here, and that'll flip it. And yeah, that will do just for this tutorial. We'll look at just joining these up in the next tutorial and everything, but I wanted to just quickly look at a quick how to UV unwrap and put those textures on, because that's always fun, and that's what really sort of changes it from just being this plain looking sword to actually having that nice glowing inscription there. So we'll finish up this video for now and then go on to the next one.